Little luxuries are all around us. I mean, who doesn't love the good things in life? But just because I enjoy a little luxury doesn't mean that I can always afford it. Until I discovered Quince. Quince is my go-to for all essentials at an affordable price. Items like organic cotton sweaters, 14 karat gold jewelry, washable silk tops and dresses are all at a price within reach. And the best part is that all Quince items are priced 50 to 80% less than similar brands. And they're all made with premium fabrics and finishes. I live in athleisure, and my navy blue slim fit jacket from Quince has become one of my favorite pieces to both run in and just kind of hang out in. It's warm on those chillier spring days, and it's sweat wicking, which is perfect to work out in. So give yourself the luxury you deserve with Quince. Go to quince.com/8020 for free shipping on your order and 365-day returns. That's QUINCE.com/8020 to get free shipping and 365-day returns. Quince.com/8020.
From Disney, on March 21st, the musical movie event of the year arrives in theaters.
My name is Snow White.
Flawless. Exquisite.
Get tickets now.
Waiting on a wind.
Snow White will have you on your feet
I think that's a wonderful idea.
and cheering for more.
I was thinking the same thing.
Experience the magical story.
Magic mirror on the wall. Who's the fairest one of all?
Snow White.
Disney's Snow White, only in theaters March 21st. Rated PG. Parental guidance suggested. Tickets on sale now.
I need you to go back and listen to last week's episode. It was called our prep week episode, an introduction to the surf series, where I kind of just like give you the lowdown on what surf is, what we're doing here, what the point is, and all that jazz. How to get the free guidebook that goes along with these episodes, why we're doing it, explaining all kind of the ins and outs of what surf is. But just to give you a little bit of a recap, surf stands for Stop, Understand, Relationships, and Faith. And those are the 4 components that kind of go into learning how to find joy and purpose through the ebbs and flows of life, and kind of learning how to ride the wave. So we're going to get into all of that today. But first and foremost, I wanted to just give you guys a little bit of a life update, because I've been in the midst of a transition, the midst of a shift, and I've been offline, which is really exciting. So I wanted to share a little bit of my heart and the things that have been going on the podcast, and we can do a little bit of a catch up. So just set the scene for you guys. I am sitting amongst a ton of boxes. Lexi's my little sister. She's getting married in June, but she is receiving a lot of wedding gifts. People are just being so generous. So I'm sitting amongst a bunch of boxes, and this is kind of the quietest room in the house. We call it my dad's office. And if you guys missed it, I moved back to Ocean City, and I'm back home, like home. So if you guys missed that, go listen to, it's an episode called Moving Home Feels Like a Green Light, and I kind of go over the ins and outs there. So if you missed it, that's like the biggest life update of all of that. I'm back in Ocean City, but I'm sitting amongst a bunch of boxes, and I'm drinking some coffee. I would do anything for a Naval Bagels cold brew right now. Naval Bagels cold brew. If you guys are in Annapolis, Naval Bagels is this bagel place, and they have the most electric cold brew. It's one of those beverages that you drink and you just get so much done because you're so pumped up. And so I would do anything for one of those right now, but instead I'm drinking my Nespresso. They have a Kona coffee blend, and so I put one of those in, but I'm not sure if it's like technically espresso or if it's Kona's just its own, I don't know coffee that well, and I really should because I like it so much. But I'm drinking one of those, and I put some water in it because it was really strong. So I'm drinking, it's almost like an Americano. Anyway, that's kind of what's going on right now. I have been in the midst of, like I said, a transition. And because of that, I have kind of rolled back or pulled back on my fitness training. The past 2 weeks, I have been really focusing on A, school, and B, just having a down week, but kind of making it like a down 2 weeks. And that's been really helpful for a number of reasons. I have trained really hard for what feels like a really long time, and then I feel like I kind of plateaued. And it kind of was a mix of like I got bored, and I also just got kind of stagnant. Like once the weather kind of changed in the fall, I just have felt so stagnant and unmotivated. Like I would still go to the gym, but it just wasn't it didn't feel like I was being productive. I just felt like I was just working out to kind of check a box. And so moving home, I knew that I needed something different, and obviously a lot was changing. So I was like, you know what? I'm just going to take 2 weeks of a down week, really focus on mobility, focus on kind of just like going back to the basics. My mom recommended a training program called Symmetry, and that's from Mind Pump Media. I haven't really listened to their podcast, but my mom raves about it, so I probably should. But they have a lot of really cool training programs, and one that my mom recommended was called Symmetry. So I started doing that, and it's the first 2 weeks is really, really, really chill. I kind of feel like I'm not working out, to be honest, and I know that's bad to say, but they're kind of like mobility, almost borderline like physical therapy type sessions, which as I'm doing these workouts, I'm shocked at how like these little muscles that I didn't know that I had are kind of hurting. I don't know if hurting's the right word, but maybe sore. So it's interesting to see how switching things up impacts my body. And so I'm really excited about having this downtime. Like I haven't been running. I haven't been doing any crazy cardio. I've mixed in some yoga and a little bit of yoga sculpt because Lexi's been teaching yoga sculpt here in Ocean City, and I love going to her classes. And yeah, I've just kind of been doing less, and I've actually felt better. Crazy how that works. And I think that it's so funny how that aligns so perfectly with this series, because doing less, you get more. Last week on the podcast, we talked about Lent, and we talked about how I don't feel qualified to do like a Lent study. So this isn't like a Lent Bible study or anything. So I highly recommend going and listening to a couple episodes that I'll have linked in the show notes of where you guys can learn about Lent, a book that I'll recommend down in the show notes. But I've been doing a lot less in a lot of areas of my life, and I'm actually reaping more benefits. Wild how that happens. It sounds so simple, but that's just kind of the case. And so as we kind of embark on this series today, this stop episode, this stop surf lesson, so we'll call it, I really want you guys to just remember that just because you're taking things out doesn't mean that you're going to do less. And just because you're taking things out doesn't mean that good things aren't going to happen. I think there's kind of this universal perspective where if you're not working really hard, if you're not grinding, if you're not checking on the boxes, then you're not really making progress. And I don't really think that that's necessarily true. Yes, of course, there are seasons where we need to work really, really, really hard. But most of the time, I found that the less you do, the more you benefit. Last week on the pod, I kind of shared that social media has kind of been a little bit of an issue for me. And so I've really backed off. So if I've been quiet over there, and if you follow me over there and you've been like, where's Lily? That's why, is that I've really backed off and just kind of shared what I need to share, like updates or stuff about the podcast and important things like that. But when it comes to stuff in my personal life, I've really just kind of reeled back. And I think that's been really beneficial, because I would share and then I would compare. And the minute that I posted something, it would be like, okay, well, what's everybody else doing? And I wouldn't even do it intentionally. It just would, like, those thoughts would kind of creep into my mind. So I decided that for Lent this year, I was going to fast social media. And so that's been really, really cool. And we'll talk about that later in the episode. But another thing that I've been focusing on is being more mindful about food and being more intentional with the food that I eat, especially when it comes to treats. Okay, like I love a little sweet treat. And if you know anything about my journey with body image and disordered eating and all that kind of stuff, this topic is really, really, really touchy for me. This is a really sensitive area. And maybe once Lent's over, I'll kind of go into all the ways that God is working in my life in that area. But I felt like he was calling me to be more mindful about what I was eating. Like, I have such a huge sweet tooth. And so I would just go and like nibble on chocolate and like nibble on whatever. And I just kind of realized that like I wasn't being mindful and intentional with the things that I was putting in my body. And God kind of just like gently brought that to my attention. And I'm excited to see how he continues to work in that area. So I backed off on the sweet treats. And it doesn't feel like a rule. Like for the first time in my whole life, I don't feel like I'm avoiding something just to be skinny. I feel like God has just kind of called me to like, hey, let's be mindful. Let's be intentional. Let's prioritize protein. And that's been really cool. So I will continue to share more about both of those things kind of throughout the next couple weeks. But I want to remind you that like those are my areas. Like those are my like struggle spots essentially. And as we talk today, your struggle spots will probably be really different. So just because I'm taking a break from those two things doesn't mean that you have to. I only share that because I think it's important to come at this from like a really personal level, because finding what are your struggle spots is tough, and finding what you need to let go of can be really, really isolating. So I only share those pieces of information to let you know that you're not alone, and not for you to necessarily compare what my weaknesses and my areas of opportunity are going to be the same for you, because that's not always going to be the case. So the topic at hand is removing things from your life that distract and do not serve. And I mentioned that one of those things for me has been food, and really prioritizing good food, being mindful of the good food that I'm eating. And speaking of good food, I'm really excited to tell you guys about Good Ranchers, a partner on today's episode. Good Ranchers is American meat delivered. Did you know that over 140,000 family farms in the United States have actually closed down since 2017? A lot of the meat that is in grocery stores is not coming from American farms. It's imported from overseas, where mass production and low costs take priority. So Good Ranchers solves that problem. Good Ranchers is 100% American sourced. Every cut of beef, chicken, and pork is raised and harvested right here in the USA, so you can support American ranchers while knowing exactly where your meat comes from. Right now, Good Ranchers is running their Spring into Action promotion, so you and your family can support local ranchers and easily get American quality meat delivered right to your door. When you subscribe to any of their boxes, you'll get free bacon, ground beef, seed oil-free chicken nuggets, or salmon in every order for a year. You get to pick which one you want, and what's even better is that you can use my code 8020 at checkout to get $25 off your first order. To invest in American farms and get high-quality meat that upholds the values of tradition, visit goodranchers.com and use code 8020, that's 8020, to claim your free meat and $25 off. That's goodranchers.com and use my code 8020 to get your free meat and $25 off. Good Ranchers, American meat delivered.
Today at T-Mobile, I'm joined by a special co-anchor.
What up, everybody? It's your boy, Big Snoop Deal Double G.
Snoop, where can people go to find great deals?
Head to T-Mobile.com and get 4 iPhone 16s with Apple Intelligence on us, plus 4 lines for $25.
That's quite a deal, Snoop. And when you switch to T-Mobile, you can save versus the other big guys' comparable plans plus streaming.
Respect. We up out of here.
See how you can save on wireless and streaming versus the other big guys at T-Mobile.com/switch. Apple Intelligence requires iOS 18.1 or later.
Other little life updates to share with you guys. I finally feel like I'm finding my flow, which I was kind of scared there for a second that I wouldn't. And I think it's because I forgot what it feels like to move. I forgot how much energy it takes, how draining it is, how emotional it is, how kind of lonely it is. And I've been doing a couple things over the past couple weeks that have really helped during this process. The first is that I've been calling on my people a lot more, and I've been really trying to not let loneliness win. I feel pretty lonely here, but I know that I have people far and wide that I can call on and that I do rely on, and that I can call them very good friends of mine. And so I've been trying to make connections there, and also trying to obviously like make connections here, but it's hard. I think finding a group of people. I mean, it took me at least a year back in Annapolis to find people who I could call if I had an emergency, or who I could call and be like, hey, do you just want to come over for dinner? Like, we don't have to talk at all, but we can just hang out. Like, that took time. And sometimes those types of friendships take forever to find, or sometimes they're really quick. It's rare when they're quick, but they do happen occasionally. And so I think I forgot that that kind of stuff takes time. And so I've been trying to call my friends more and just make that a priority. And I also think that that's helpful because one of the reasons why I left Annapolis, because a lot of my people, like my core people, were either about to move as well within the next couple months to a year, or they had already moved. And that's kind of the funny thing about Annapolis, was that it was kind of a passing through. It was very, very temporary for a lot of people, just kind of like a quick stop along the way of this journey. And so watching people come and go was really hard. And then being the one to go was pretty hard. I don't know. Moving is just a weird thing. And, yeah, it's been interesting, but I think I'm finally starting to find my flow here. And only in the sense of that I've found a routine. And I don't necessarily know if I'm totally satisfied with it, but I do have a better flow now, I think, than I did a couple weeks ago. And that takes time. So friendships take time, your routines take time. And I think it's also important to understand that you have to work at these things. It's not just gonna happen for you. I was listening to Annie Downs' podcast, That Sounds Fun, yesterday, and it was an episode with, let me pull up what the episode is called. The episode was called Pressing On When God is Silent, a meet cute story and the purity movement with Rebecca St. James and Cubby Fink. And Annie said something in the episode that really stuck out to me. And it was this concept of course you have to let God work. And of course, God is always working and moving in your life. But you also have to put buoys on your arms sometimes. You have to do the work yourself. You have to call on other people to help you do the work. And you have to truly put an effort in order to stay afloat. And that just totally jumped out at me, especially knowing that we were going into the surf series, or that I was, going into to talk about this episode today, part of the surf series. And this just kind of continues to go along with like the water theme of like, in order to stay afloat, you have to do specific things to ride the wave. You have to do specific things in order to ensure that you are staying afloat through the transitions of life. You might have to put buoys on your arms. And so as we kind of roll into this week today of removing things that distract you from God, I want to remind you that you don't have to go at this alone, and there are tools and resources. Maybe it's talking to a counselor or a therapist. Maybe it is some sort of fitness routine, a fitness outlet that will help you to blow off some steam and get stronger physically while doing it. Maybe it's a doctor or another sort of like medical professional who can help you in a specific area. Maybe it is a mentor or just a good friend you can go to and talk to about the things that you're currently looking to stop doing that distract you from your true purpose and true joys of life. This week, this step is personal. The week of stop is really, really deeply personal. And I feel like for the past 2 months, I wasn't really hearing from God. I was doing all the things. I was reading my Bible. I was journaling. I was in anticipation of the move that we were about to make. And obviously, having the move completed and feeling a little bit settled in kind of feels like a breakthrough. But I also think that the resources that I reached for, the buoys, have helped me with this breakthrough. Another quote in that episode from That Sounds Fun that I listened to, I'll leave it linked in the show notes for you guys, but Annie said something along the lines of like, if you're not hearing from God, just do the last thing that you heard him say. That once again stuck out to me because I was doing all the things. I was reading my Bible, I was doing my journal, I was going to church, doing all the things, whatever, but I wasn't really feeling it. Like I just wasn't really feeling like God was moving in my life. And it's almost like, you're sending up these prayers, you're reading, you're doing the journaling, you're doing all the things, all the little things. You're like, is this actually going somewhere? Is God actually hearing my prayers? Am I actually, like, is this almost like, is this working? Like, is that bad to say? But like, is this working? The last thing I heard him say was just kind of like, tune out the distractions. You need to stop scrolling. You need to turn off your phone. You need to be more mindful about specific areas of your life. And so my question to you is, how do you know if something's a distraction? Does it take up a lot of your time? Does it leave you feeling kind of empty? Does it make you question your purpose and your path? Does it leave you feeling joyful? Is it a distraction? Only you can answer that. I'm living my experience, you're living yours. But I think if you rely on it for kind of a sense of comfort to a degree, like, you can let those things go and you're still going to be okay. I think it's really interesting to consider the psychology behind the things that we gravitate towards for comfort.
This episode is brought to you by Prime Video. In the small town of Holland, Michigan, nothing is ever what it seems. Behind the tulip festivals and pretty houses lay dark secrets that threaten to tear a marriage apart. Nicole Kidman stars in this darkly twisted thriller about a wife and mother whose quest to uncover her husband's secrets may get her more than she bargained for. Holland, streaming on Prime Video March 27th.
Are your ulcerative colitis symptoms proving difficult to manage? Tremfya guselkumab can help you manage the cycle of UC symptoms. At 1 year, many patients taking Tremfya achieved clinical remission, and some patients also achieved endoscopic remission. Individual results may vary. Tremfya is a prescription medicine used to treat adults with moderately to severely active ulcerative colitis. Serious allergic reactions and increased risk of infections may occur. Before treatment, your doctor should check you for infections and TB. Tell your doctor if you have an infection, flu-like symptoms, or if you need a vaccine. Ask your doctor if Tremfya can help you manage the cycle of UC symptoms. Call 1-800-526-7736 to learn more, or visit tremfyaradio.com.
The more you're exposed to specific circumstances, the feeling that's associated with those specific circumstances can provide you comfort. It's almost like training a dog, right? Like, if you train your dog to sit when you say sit and retrieve when you say retrieve, and they get a treat every time, they're going to become really comfortable and really obedient when those commands are given. And the same thing happens with the things that distract us. If social media is kind of your thing, you're going to get the feeling of the little treat every time that you scroll, because you're going to just kind of scroll until you find something that satisfies you. And so I'm not sure where that applies in your life, but it's good to remove the things that we find comfort in on like a worldly level, so then we can find comfort in God, and we can find comfort in what he says about us and who he is and how he's working in our lives, and kind of let go of the comfort of the worldly things. And that's uncomfortable, right? Because, scrolling before bed, that's kind of a fun little, desensitizing your brain type of activity. But by removing that and replacing that with turning on worship music and writing in my journal or reading the Bible, that's been significantly more beneficial than my bedtime scroll. So I don't know where that applies in your life. I don't know where your weaknesses are, where you find the most comfort, because it's really easy to be like, no, I find comfort in God. It's really, really easy to be like, no, I find comfort in God and God only. That's obviously like the right answer. If you ask any Christian, oh, I find comfort in the Lord, but like, do you really? I want you to challenge where you find comfort. Where are your areas of distraction? And once you pinpoint those, I think you're going to come to some sort of breakthrough. If you're following along in the Surf Guidebook, which pause, time out. If you haven't downloaded the Surf Guidebook, you can click the link in the show notes to download. It's completely free, and it kind of outlines all of these topics. It outlines a bit of a Bible study. It's like a mini Bible study. Feel free to take it and run and Google more verses and more parts of scripture that go along with these topics. But in the guidebook for today's episode, we are on page 5 and we are in Luke 10. I love this story, and this one, it's kind of cool. So I'll just read it. It's short and sweet. We're in Luke 10 verses 38 through 42. And the heading in my Bible says, "At the home of Martha and Mary. As Jesus and his disciples were on their way, he came to a village where a woman named Martha opened her home to him. She had a sister called Mary who sat at the Lord's feet and listened to what he said. But Martha was distracted by all the preparations that had to be made. She came to him and asked, 'Lord, don't you care that my sister has left me to do all the work by myself? Tell her to help me.' 'Martha, Martha,' the Lord answered, 'you are worried and upset about many things, but few things are needed, or indeed only one. Mary has chosen what's better, and it will not be taken from her.'" So this story really jumps out for a number of reasons. First, I have 2 sisters, and the amount of times that we would go to our mom and be like, "Mom, she's not helping me." And so that just kind of is just funny to me, because that's just like such a sister thing to do, right? To be like, go to the authority figure and be like, "She's not helping me." So that kind of cracks me up. The second thing that I want to point out to you guys is how when you have a house guest, it is so natural to be like, I have to do all these things. I got to make the cheese board. I got to make sure that we have a good bottle of wine on deck ready to go. I got to make sure that, the carpets are freshly vacuumed, that the dog isn't jumping on them, that the bathroom's clean, the toilet's scrubbed, the candles are going, the lighting is at, the perfect dimmer switch. So we have the ambiance, we got the jazz music in the background. Like when you're hosting, you have a lot going on in your brain. So I completely resonate with Martha. Because she is distracted by the obligations of the world around her, of hosting, because that's her present thing is hosting. However, how wild is it to consider that Martha literally has Jesus in her house and she's worried about like the cheese board. She's worried about the prep. She's worried about making sure that the ambiance is right. But Jesus is literally in her house. And she could ask him anything that she wants. She could just sit at his feet and listen to his teachings. And that's what Mary's doing. Mary's like, yo, Jesus is here right now. I'm going to listen to what he has to say. But Martha's worried about the cheese board. And so I just think that this is so interesting because of all the people that Martha could have in her house, she has Jesus and she's still worried about the cheese board. I totally do that too. Like of all the ways that I could spend my morning, instead of spending it in the Bible, I'm worried about making sure that I have a post up so more people know that a podcast episode went live. I'm more worried about capturing the moment for Instagram stories than I am for actually being in the moment. And so we do it too. We all do it too. And if you're following along in the guidebook, what was Martha distracted by, which is verse 40, Martha's just distracted by the obligations of the prep, of being a host. And it's totally relatable. She's distracted by the worldly obligations. What was Martha's request to Jesus, if you're following along? Verse 40, Martha's request was, yo, tell Mary to get off the floor and help me. Like, Martha's like, my sister is not pulling her weight. How funny is that? And she says, don't you care that my sister has left me to do the work by myself? Tell her to help me. And it's almost demanding. And it kind of creates this distance between Martha and Jesus because there's a disconnect. Martha can't see what's a priority here. And I wonder too, it's like, is that her fault or does she just not know? Like, is she actively trying to distract herself from the teachings, or does she just not realize what's really important? And I think it's the latter. I think that she just doesn't realize what's really important. And so Jesus responded to her, with kindness and with kind of just a call to like narrow the focus. And Jesus said, Martha, you're worried and you're upset about a lot of things, but few things are needed. And then he goes one step further and says, or indeed only one. He says, few things are important, but when you really think about it, only one thing is important. And he goes on to say that Mary has chosen what's better and it won't be taken away from her, which I think is really cool because at the end of the day, like, who cares if the ambiance is right? Who cares if the cheese board is good? Who cares if, the silverware is freshly shined? One thing is important, and that's that Jesus was in the home of Mary and Martha, and those girls got an opportunity to be with him and just sit at his feet and listen. How cool is that? I think about all those times that I've hosted. Why am I going to cry? I'm getting emotional. All those times that I've hosted in my condo in Annapolis. And I've actually been thinking about, obviously moving is a lot, but I've been reflecting a little bit lately on the nights that we would host friends at our condo back in Annapolis. And I love hosting people. I think it's so fun. And my favorite nights were always the nights where we would just sit on the couch and just like linger and talk. When I read this, I think about how they're probably just all sitting around and like lingering in the presence of Jesus and lingering in the presence of each other and learning and talking and hopefully laughing. And it doesn't really give us much here of what went on at the house, but I can imagine that after Martha kind of came to this realization of like, oh, you know what? I'm just going to linger with my sister on the floor, and the disciples were there too, and we're all just going to kind of hang out and just learn about Jesus. Like, that's really, really, really cool. How much time do you spend just sitting on the floor lingering in the presence of God? Do you linger, or are you just excited and kind of hurry to get on to the next thing? So this week, not only do I want you to kind of think about what's distracting you, I also want you to consider lingering just a little bit longer. I think God moves slow. He's got his own kind of clock, and I don't really understand it. And there's a song called Slower I Go by SEU Worship. And I don't like the live version, but they just put out a studio version and I just like it better. I don't know why. I think the live version, there's like an underlying tone in it that maybe it's tone. I don't know. I don't know a lot about music production, but there's something in that song that I just don't like the way that it sounds. But the studio version sounds so good. I've been playing it on repeat like since it came out, and it just makes so much sense. God's never in a hurry. So why ever would I be? That's a lyric. God, you're never in a hurry. So why ever would I be? The take action this week is to ask God to reveal the things that distract you. What's something that you reach for when you need a distraction? Does it hinder you from completing more important tasks? Has this thing become more important than God? And I want you to brainstorm a few ways to stop doing this thing. And not only do I want you to brainstorm ways to stop, but find ways to linger in the presence of God. Find ways to get to know him better. Find ways to continue to fix your gaze on Jesus, even though sometimes we don't have our priorities straight. It's impossible to always have your priorities straight. And I think, I'm kind of wrestling right now with the balance between like God as this completely holy figure, that there are characters in the Bible that have visions of him or encounters with God, and they literally like fall over and fall to their knees because he's so mighty and so powerful, but then also viewing God and Jesus as a friend. I don't know. I'm enjoying this season of Lent because I have been learning so much. There's definitely a balance between the two, but like once you realize how high and mighty God is, you don't really want to do the things that you were distracted by before. And not only is it pleasing to God, but it also just allows me to grow closer to him because I have to rely on him to stop doing the things that I once did that might have set up a divide between the two of us. So that's what this week's all about. If you want support during this. I would love to support you. If you're not already signed up for the email list, you got to go hop on that. The way, I'll give you guys a little back end details here. If you download the Surf Guidebook on Flowdesk, that's the email platform that I use. If you download the Surf Guidebook through Flowdesk, which if you use the link in the show notes, it's the only way to get it. So just use the link in the show notes. It adds you to the Surf Guidebook email list. So I can see who's on the email list. I'm sending out what's called a Tuesday check-in. So every week I will check in with you and just provide a little bit of support, provide a little bit of additional instruction, and just kind of continue to help equip you through the Surf series. So if you want to get on that email list, if you want to get the guidebook, if you want support through all of this, I want to be here for you. So please sign up for the email list. And then once you get that Surf Tuesday check-in, you can just hit reply as you would any old email, and you can reply to me, and I would love to interact with you over email. And we can talk, we can learn, we can pray, we can just hang out and navigate all of this together, navigating the ebbs and flows of finding your purpose and finding joy in this crazy, crazy life. So that is how we can connect and how I would love to support you and hear from you. All right, friends, that is about it for today's episode. If you enjoyed it, please be sure to give it a rating and a review, and that just helps more people find and listen to the show. I am so grateful for you guys and so grateful for just your participation in this series, and I can't wait to just continue to just chat about this stuff and just keep this conversation up. So please be sure to sign up for the email list if you aren't already. You can connect with me on Instagram. Like I mentioned, I'm not there like a lot these days, but I do hop on and post little smidges of stuff as far as like podcast updates and announcements and all that stuff goes. So you can follow me there. And as always, be sure to follow the show and you will get updates automatically right to your phone when a new episode goes live. They go live every single Thursday. I love you guys so much, and I'll talk to you soon.